Good morning, everyone. We're just giving you a few extra moments to let everyone join the webinar, and we'll then get the presentations underway. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Agri-EPI Centre's webinar, The Importance of Visibility Across the Agri-Food Supply Chain. I am Annabelle, your host for this morning, and we are delighted to be joined by our members, Intertech, Mantle Labs, and Amazon Web Services to discuss an important topic around visibility of the agri-food supply chain. Before we begin, I would like to go over housekeeping for the webinar. As attendees, you are in listen-only mode, but you can still interact with us by sending a message via the chat function or submitting a question by the questions bar. Questions will be taken at the end of the presentations, and if we run out of time and do not manage to answer your question, we will follow up with you post-webinar. Please note the webinar is also being recorded. Now, I'm delighted to get the webinar underway and introduce you to Catherine Beer, Senior Director of Supply Chain Assurance at Intertech. So Catherine leads Intertech Supply Chain Assurance Solutions and has 15-year supply chain management experience. Catherine helps clients address and focus on vital needs of their supply chains by identifying key supply chain risks, which empower customers to make informed decisions. Over to you, Catherine. We can see your screen.
Lovely. Thank you, Annabelle. Welcome, everyone, and thanks again for joining the webinar. So today, what I want to take us through is looking at some of those challenges that we are facing in the food agri supply chain and what we can do as businesses, no matter which part of the supply chain that you exist in, to help overcome those. Just firstly, a short introduction about Intertech for those of you who don't know us well. For more than 130 years, companies around the world have depended on Intertech to help ensure the quality and safety of their products, processes, and systems. As a FTSE 100 company, we go beyond testing, inspection, and certifying products. We are a total quality assurance provider to industries worldwide. And through our global network of state-of-the-art facilities and industry-leading technical expertise, we provide innovative, bespoke assurance testing and inspection and certification services to our customers. And we do this through our large network of over 47,000 plus people in over 100 countries. Leading in the supply chain compliance field, we conduct over 100,000 audits per year, and our Agri division helps our customers like you in any form of quality assurance from farm to fork. But let's get started on the webinar. Let's begin by looking at the challenges that you face due to the many supply chain complexities that exist. A typical agricultural supply chain includes, as we know, farmers, suppliers, processors, distributors, other consumers, and other stakeholders. And due to a number of actors involved in the supply chain, they become more complex and, of course, more riskier. The more nodes and links that exist in a network, then clearly the more complex it becomes. And the reality today is that we are now expected to show and know more about the structure of who our suppliers use and what suppliers those suppliers use, and so on and so forth. We've seen many different regulations or laws come into practice in the last couple of years, depending on demanding different companies to get to grips with their end-tier supply chains. Modern Slavery Act, for example, was one that came out with a major focus in the UK, demanding that people map further down their supply chain and be able to show what they are doing in terms of due diligence. The same with the Data Transparency Act, different ESG reporting needs, food traceability demands linked to many of the different scandals that we see, and many more. And I guess, why is that important that you know? Well, what we see when we work with our customers to continually watch what the trends are. We research, discuss with customers and survey them, and most importantly, analyse all the millions and millions of data points of information that we capture from our audits, inspections and testing. And we look at all of these to try to understand what are the various external risks year on year, even month on month, that can affect companies by the sectors that they're in. And the impact of external factors on agricultural production, like weather, pests and diseases that are hard to predict and control, makes it even more challenging to keep on top and understand how you can then achieve the targets that you've put in place with your supply chain. The lack of traceability in the agricultural supply chain, slower financial transactions, intensive manual work, and many other challenges arise. More concerns around the efficacy of the agricultural supply chain become apparent. Additionally, counterfeits may appear early at each stage of the supply chain and negatively impact all business stakeholders, governments and consumers as well. So lots of different challenges that you see listed here. If I just take a couple of those, where we look at the continued problems that we see year on year. Food security fraud, it's not a new one. It continues to be a problem and continues to appear nearly year on year. We know that human rights violations, the big one back in 2011, when 6 of the world's largest pesticide manufacturers were put in the limelight after several studies criticised their widespread trade of dangerous substances for manufacturing herbicides and pesticides. The studies showed that globally, pesticide poisoning had been responsible for over 1 million victims each year. So of course, all of these things is now demanding this greater visibility that we have within the supply chain. So whether you're an end brand or retailer that is procuring the products to sell them in your supermarket shelves, or whether you're part further down the chain, there's different demands that each of you will have to show this visibility. So the challenges are many and a lot stemming from complex and unpredictable structures. So now let us explore what makes a good supply chain management practices and ideas on how you can mature your processes and practices. Let's first look at sustainable supply chains. In a recent UN Global Compact review conducted by Ernst & Young, they noted the importance of sustainable supply chains and how to factor in resilient and responsible factors. Resiliency encompasses the need to adapt to external challenges to maintain business continuity, such as the risks from rising global temperature, weather impacts, cybersecurity, energy resilience, resource use optimization, and so on and so forth. We have seen many companies expand their R&D departments to look at new ways to grow crops, for example, use alternative energies, etc. And depending on the sector a business is in, will determine how innovative they need to be. They cite, for example, one European consumer product company who's developing a grain that can grow in a desert to respond to challenges relating to drought. Then we have responsibility, which addresses the business impact on communities, the environment, and across the value chain, resulting in a supply chain that can respond and adapt to changing conditions while looking for that innovation. So, there's lots of reasons we could explain why a well-run supply chain is important, and we need that to be sustainable for the future. But how to get there is a journey, and I just want to take a short moment to look at how a company can progress through that and then go on to talk about some of the tools that you can use to get there. Of course, the easy route is to set minimum standards required and requested by us. You need as a minimum to look at what risk could affect your business and how to ensure your suppliers are remaining compliant with your expectations. For those companies that understand the benefits of going beyond the legal requirements, they begin to understand the need to look at the supply chain risk in more detail and have a process to screen and actively manage suppliers within their supply chain. And this is the established phase. When we move on to the mature phase, it really is when the company has a clear global policy and all the compliance and sustainability requirements are well communicated internally and externally with all suppliers. This means that there's clear expectations with suppliers and they have a strong monitoring program in place. And the final stage is leading the way. So taking all the above points and looking at what else they can do to improve the resilience of their supply chain. And this is when companies really look at their suppliers as partners. They work together, they look for a sustainable way to grow the company and a sustainable way to keep the supply chain growing. So obviously that's, how do we create a better business case for good supply chain management and make sure that we understand the real key value drivers behind that. I mean, these are pretty straightforward. I won't go into much detail on these, but it is about making sure that we understand the issues and establishing expectations. So that's why the mapping becomes more and more important, and why, as we know within food traceability, it's absolutely paramount to make sure that you can prove to your end consumers that you understand where everything has come from. Screening, onboarding and auditing suppliers. I mean, embedding that compliance and sustainability criteria and the zero tolerance standards into the sourcing process ensures from the start that you get the expectations to suppliers across. Addressing buying and procurement practices, very good to integrate scorecards with suppliers covering key compliance and sustainability goals, but doing it in partnership with the suppliers to make sure that you understand what's achievable. Engaging in capacity building so that you can make sure you allocate the time and effort to engage with suppliers and develop on the areas where they need help, using incentives, reporting, and of course having a diverse and inclusive supply chain. Okay, so how does it work in practice? What are the important elements that we believe companies need to look at? What organizations need are risk assessments where the analysis of the financial health is complemented by the assessment of business performance and sustainability performance of suppliers, especially the critical ones, which could be at any level of the supply chain. And of course, identifying risk signals ahead of time to gain greater visibility. So at Intertech, we tend to focus on 4 essential elements with our customers when helping them increase supply chain resilience. Visibility, as we discussed, with the need to map your supply chain, you need to have better visibility into all partners and suppliers and help them understand why you need that visibility. Accountability, today, your company, whichever part you're in the supply chain, is being held accountable for the actions of your supply chain or the supply chain below you. So making sure everybody's clear about why it's important to have that visibility. Engagement, risk will exist, that's normal. So engaging with your suppliers and educating them on how to mitigate and manage the risks is critical. And that's making sure you've got control, which again, this process should start to put you in control of how to source, manage supplier contracts, manage business decisions, and set yourself apart from your competitors. So what are the risks? How do you manage them? And how do you be proactive in mitigating them? So whether you have advanced systems today to manage supplier details or simply use traditional Excel files, you need to ensure that you are constantly cleansing and mapping the supply chain. We've mentioned several times already the need for this greater transparency, so this section of your process is key. To begin, you need to understand and ensure you have alignment on how supplier details are gathered and stored and updated regularly. Different companies will have different departments. Sometimes the quality or social or environmental departments could be working in isolation. And essentially they may use the same suppliers and have no connectivity. So ensuring that no matter what system each department uses, they all have to feed into a central point to ensure data quality. Then ensure there are owners responsible for the regular update of those points to ensure that the information is kept up to date and, critically important, it is made visible to all. It's been demanded now more and more as we see different retailers having to expose and show their supply chains. So every point has to be very clear on how they keep that data up to date. When you have good supplier details at all levels, you're now able to really look into the potential risks that they pose to the company. And so, therefore, what do you do next? So it's about mapping the risk and looking at potential systemic risks and emerging risks that could affect them. We advise, start with the basics like country, where are they located? Now, of course, if all's in the UK, then you need to go more comprehensive. So good to start with country, but then essentially you start to look at other inherent risks that could exist. So we strengthen that by combining it with brand and commodity risks. Think about the main commodity risks that could affect your business. And there's lots of different public sources of data out there where you can combine such information. And then, importantly, you can then go on to the next stage to add in various geopolitical factors that could be important. And as we know in the agri-food chain, this is extremely important. Once you've done that, you're in a much better position to be able to move forward with due diligence. We see a lot more remote ways of doing this via self-assessments, remote audit practices, etc. The point is you're setting a clear set of expectations to the supply chain on what they're required to comply with, and then how they can demonstrate to you on a regular basis how they comply or don't comply with that. And of course, if any said risks exist and that needs further due diligence or is mandated by law to have further on-site due diligence, where you go on site and conduct various audits, inspections, tests, etc., to show the compliance levels. So I hope you find this information useful in thinking through the supply chain process and how, of course, no matter where you fit within the supply chain, how it can work for you. Intratec, of course, has many different tools and services that we can offer in this area. I name a few on this slide, which of course we'd be delighted to talk to you about in more detail. Everything from our Inlight platform, which helps with the supply chain mapping and risk management, through to various remote assessment activities, on-site activities, or even business continuity planning. So thank you very much. That concludes this part of the webinar. We hope you found that insightful and thought-provoking. And of course, myself and my colleague Mark would be delighted to pick up with you afterwards any questions that you might have following the webinar. Thank you. Back over to you, Annabella.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was really insightful and very useful as well. I'm just now going to take you across to John Pierre, who is on the line at the moment. Bear with me. Okay, so John is the Chief Business Officer at Mantle Labs. Mantle Labs is a leading agri-tech company focused on AI and remote sensing technology. John previously spent a decade as an agricultural trader, investor at a large investment bank and the hedge funds and commodity trade houses. He's also an advisory group member for the UK Satellite Applications Catapult. John, we can see your screen. Over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Annabelle. Thank you, Catherine, for that great presentation, and to the audience for joining us today. I hope everyone can see my screen. So we're basically in crop monitoring from space. And when we look at this slide, we can essentially understand why this is becoming more critical. We're seeing increasing frequency of extreme climate events. This is information shared with us by a large reinsurance client. And this is essentially telling us that the traditional knowledge that we've had, particularly when it comes to agriculture, is becoming less relevant. Essentially, we're transitioning to a new normal. And as we look at some of the visualization, which has been made famous coming out of University of Reading, we can see that this is a global phenomenon. We can look at key growing areas, centers of population, and we see that this is, an issue that's just spanning every country. And particularly when we look at, for example, Brazil, the largest soybean producer in the world, and also countries like the Ivory Coast, which produces 40% of global cocoa, we can see how critical this has become. So our tool, which is geobotanics, I think one of the key things here is it's not impacted by cloud cover. So we're mixing many satellites of different types to provide a seamless daily view of the Earth. And this is unimpeded by clouds. And this point here about not being impeded by clouds is quite key for our clients, which are clients who include large reinsurers, banks, input companies, farmers, and food retailers. And they trust us for critical decision making. Our analysis spans country level, regional level, and also in the farm. And in this presentation, I'm going to go through a few examples of this. This is an example from northern Italy, where our input client was trying to analyze exactly how the planting was going on the growing season, because they weren't able to go in the field and actually see on the ground what was happening. So we used our remote sensing tools to look at, see how the progress is going, where was exactly the planting taking place. And this enabled them to come up with some critical planning for the growing season to really understand where inventories would be needed going forward. Another example from the Ivory Coast, which, as previously mentioned, produces around 40% of global cocoa. Along with Ghana, they produce two-thirds of the global supply. So it's quite key for any company that's using cocoa as a key ingredient for chocolate to go and understand very early on in the growing season and flag issues that may arise. So here we're seeing potential for production issues due to a lack of rain in the main growing belt of the cocoa region. And this is something that is obviously very critical for clients to understand very early on. But our analysis doesn't just stay at the country level, as also previously stated. Some of our clients want to understand, particularly for specific crops, what's happening on a regional level. So here we have an example of wheat being grown, and we can see exactly where the stress spots are. And this allows for not only for clients to know beforehand where the potential supply issues may be, but it also provides and allows for some remedial action to take place. So if you're a farmer, for example, or you're an input company, and you can see that there's certain farms that they're in the middle of this kind of stress band, then we can go and advise farmers to understand this is what can be done to aid and boost production going forward. Here we see our clients who come to us with particular crops that they're interested in, and we can ID it and actually see how it's progressing and understand any kind of vegetative problems which are arising in the growing cycle. Additionally, we can provide historical context. So we can zoom in not just on a country level, but on a regional, district level as well, county level, and see how this season is developing compared to prior seasons. And this is very valuable for us to understand where the production sits with respect to historical context and historical production. And this actually is something that's also critical for other clients like commodities traders who want to understand going forward, how does 2020 compare to 2019 and 2018, for example? So it's another very key and powerful tool. And typically it's only available in key growing countries at a kind of national level. So you might have this, for example, in the United States. But here we're able to use our remote sensing technology to really zoom in and see how this is actually playing out on a district, county level across many years, and how we can really understand this in a historical context. And another key lever in this as well is giving in-field analysis. The farmer is central and key to anything in agriculture. And we really pride ourselves in being able to assist growers in boosting their productivity, using inputs more efficiently, and being an enabler of precision agriculture. Here we allow the growers to understand the variability in their fields, map this in and augment this with data in terms of input cost, and really zoom in and understand where it makes sense to have interventions or not. So I think, as everyone can see, this is an end-to-end platform. We're touching the entire supply chain, and we're doing this on a global scale in near real time. This not only helps the food retailer, who can really understand where the production risks are and flag issues early on and try and source alternative sources of production or inputs if required. But it also allows for planning by input companies, commodities traders, governments, and essentially for the farmer, who's able to go and kind of take control and understand where the hotspots are and provide interventions as and when required. Now, to link this with the next speaker, we're using AWS from a perspective of their computing power, the storage, and also augmenting our AI capabilities. And they have become a really trusted partner in us in this journey to develop a world-leading platform for agriculture monitoring from space. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. That's absolutely brilliant, very insightful as well. We're now going to move across to Ronan Doyle from Amazon Web Services. And actually, Mantle Labs and Amazon Web Services work together on that geobotanics platform. And we're going to hear a little bit more about how Amazon can help to scale businesses. So Ronan joined Amazon Web Services in 2017, working in their small to medium-sized business team. He was helping organizations from a wide array of sectors, including retail, financial services, and agriculture, to leverage the cloud to innovate and grow their business. So, Ronan, we can see your screen, and over to you.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the speakers previously. I think there's a nice synergy here in terms of what I'm going to talk about today. So my name is Ronan Doyle, and I've been with Amazon Web Services for just over 3 years now. As Annabelle said, supporting our small to medium-sized businesses in the UK across many sectors to really help companies grow, innovate, scale using AWS Cloud technology. I'm now going to briefly run through today's agenda. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the Amazon culture and AWS. We'll then look at who the AWS customer is in agriculture specifically. We'll then share a couple of customer stories, touch on some of the industry drivers and how AWS are helping customers to digitally transform. And then we'll conclude with a quick recap and next steps. So Amazon is arguably the most customer-centric company in the world, and our founder, Jeff Bezos, has built Amazon on 3 big ideas, and we've really stuck by those ideas for the past 20 plus years. And the first one is put the customer first. And what we mean by this is that we are customer obsessed, not competitor focused. So we start with customer needs, we try and understand them, and then we work backwards from there to help build solutions enabling our customers to innovate and grow. And the second point is around inventing on behalf of the customer. So 90% of what we build is actually driven by what customers tell us matter. And the other 10% is built based on what we interpret customers to want. And also we look at be patient with the outcome. So we're a long-term focused business, and we're willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time when it comes to innovation. We're stubborn on our vision and flexible on the details around how we get there. And it's really from this approach that Amazon Web Services was founded. And Amazon Web Services has grown over the past 14 years to become the largest cloud provider in the market and is a separate business within Amazon. And the term cloud computing refers to the on-demand delivery of IT resources via the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing. So the first question we always ask when working with customers is trying to get a gauge on who the customer is. And if we look at the agricultural industry with regards to AWS, we have a very diverse group of customers, which reflects the complexity of the agricultural industry. And our customers include seed, crop production, fertilization companies, the equipment manufacturers, the food processors, integrated protein companies, and large fruit and veg producers. And some of our customers even manage value chains that reach all the way to the end consumer. We also look after a large and growing amount of ag tech startups, one of which we've heard from already from John today, covering off Mantle Labs, who are helping the agricultural industry maintain food security, applying machine learning to satellite imagery to monitor crops and warn of potential supply issues. So this is just a small sample of some of the customers that we work with. And as you can see, it's very diverse, but I'd like to focus on 3 today to give you an idea of how customers are using AWS. And the first is Yanmar, who are using AWS IoT Greengrass to increase the intelligence of greenhouse operations by automatically detecting and recognizing the main growth stages of vegetables to help them grow more crops. The second is buyer group science, who have built an Internet of Things pipeline that manages the collection, processing, and analysis of seed growing data, including temperature, humidity levels, and current soil conditions. And this enables buyers, data analysts to access data in real time on their mobile devices via dashboards, enabling them to make faster data-driven decisions with regards to seed and growing conditions. And the third is Illumina, and they've built a low-cost, highly performing genomics platform, which helps them increase their speed to answers. So our experience with customers has given us a key insight into 5 industry drivers that are unique to agriculture. And the first, which we touched on earlier on, is sustainability. So we need to be able to do more with less. And the population is expected to increase to 9.8 billion by 2050, which is a 25% increase from today. Another area which we actually touched on earlier on was around that the industry is uniquely impacted by global commodity prices, which in one season can have very different impacts depending on where the line of business sits in the value chain. This is a tight margin business, so optimizing for profit and demonstrating ROI for any investment is crucial. And consumer expectations have shifted. Consumers want to know how and where their products are made. These demand signals reverberate all the way back to the farm. Whether it's agriculture or any other industry, data has become a strategic asset to organizations. And we understand when you manage a business dependent on the biological production of crops, which are subject to factors such as weather or trade policy, leveraging data to mitigate risk and decision-making can deliver substantial value. And connectivity challenges. Collecting, managing, and analyzing data in real time in rural areas is a challenge, and there can be limiting factors in deploying data-enabled services. So there are 5 reasons why companies are moving so quickly to the AWS cloud. And the first is agility. And by this, we mean that you can spin up resources and deploy in minutes, enabling companies to experiment and innovate more quickly and frequently. The second is cost savings, which means you only pay for what you use. We're similar to how an electricity company would work. Customers can build more cost effectively by also leveraging AWS's economies of scale. And the third is elasticity. So you can provision the amount of resources that you actually need, enabling you to scale up and down along with the needs of your business. So this can also reduce your costs and improve your ability to meet your customers' demands. The fourth is it enables you to innovate faster. And by what we mean by this is that you can focus your highly valuable IT resources on developing applications that differentiate your business and delight your customers, instead of doing the undifferentiated heavy lifting of managing infrastructure and data centers. And finally, with AWS, it enables you to go global in minutes. But I'd just like to deep dive just on one particular point, which is quite unique to the agricultural industry. So many agricultural businesses are seasonal in nature, with peak data activities tied to particular events, such as planting season or harvest windows. And AWS provides the ability to provision just what you need to scale up and down capacity with the ebbs and flows of your season. So there's 3 critical areas that are actually driving digital transformation within the agricultural sector. So let's start with smart and connected. And there's a lot of talk of smart, but what does it actually really mean? So smart or smarter operations are fully integrated collaborative systems that respond in real time to meet changing demands and conditions in the supply network and in your customers' needs. And essentially what this allows you to do is to have more control over your data, to enable your business and your employees to make data-driven decisions. And this leads to improved process and provides signals and indications that can be used for customer improvements and ideas for new services. There's predicted to be 225 million connected devices online by 2025. And examples of these connected devices include soil temperature monitors, drones, or robotics. Customers are also looking to provide context to their data. and eliminate data silos. AWS customers not only collect data, but also cleaning the data is absolutely critical. And in many cases, cleaning the data is the most time-intensive part, up to 80%. And customers tell us that in many cases, their data in their organization sits in different parts of the business in silos. And at AWS, we're helping customers to create data lakes, which enables a consistent flow of data into a single source, making it easier for customers to carry out analytics. And finally, once the data is actually captured in the cloud, it's stored and managed efficiently. It's then ready for machine learning, for applying things like machine learning and other analysis to deliver actionable insights. So whether that's monitoring the health of animals, like companies such as Ice Robotics in Edinburgh, or whether it's looking at inventory monitoring or price forecasting using AI, such as companies like Mantle Labs, AWS provides you with the platform to enable you to link technology to business outcomes. So let's quickly recap on what we covered today. So we started off by talking a little bit more about our Amazon culture, diving into AWS, and looking at who the AWS agricultural customer actually is. And we then transitioned into sharing some customer stories, touching on industry drivers and how the cloud is enabling digital transformation at many parts of the ecosystem and supply chain. So as a next step, I'd recommend that you visit our AWS Hub. I've provided a link, as you can see on the screen, but we can send it over after the webinar. I'm sure Annabelle will help with that. And here you can actually access customer interviews. You can look at industry-specific solutions that we provide at AWS, and you can also reach out directly to us through the Connect with AWS button. And then you'll receive a call from one of our business development representatives if you feel like you have any projects or any ideas you wanted to discuss that might be applicable to the cloud. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. I really appreciate you tuning in to hear a little bit more about AWS and how we're working in this sector. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ronan. That is brilliant. So thank you very much for your presentation. We have a few questions coming in, which is really positive. We actually have finished a schedule as well, so we can go straight into the Q&A session. I'd just like to say, we've heard from the presenters around ways in which the supply chain can be enhanced to provide more visibility. This is through data, satellite imagery, and specific systems, which are all vital to really improving the visibility across the whole of the supply chain. So if all the presenters could come off mute and put their videos on, and we can just sort of go into the Q&A session. Okay, brilliant. We can see you there. Right, the first question has come through, and it's for you, Catherine, and it is from Natalia, and it says, thanks for a really interesting webinar. So for Catherine, in order to have a sustainable food supply chain, it is important to consider the energy usage. So how do you at Intertech monitor energy to achieve UK's net zero target?
Yeah, great question. Now, of course, there's many different services within Intertech that we can offer, particularly on that. And there's a few different ways we go about it. So I'll give a couple of examples. I'm not the full expert in this, so just touching on some of the areas. We do have via our Inlight system a way that the customers can actually record the needed information that they have to provide up the supply chain to the end customer that is asking for that data. So it's again just a very, very simple method of having a self-assessment table where they put that information into that. We then can go on site and perform actual assessments and reviews to actually check and collect that data. We don't, our services don't go to offering any of the monitoring kits, for example, or installing of any of that. We can obviously make recommendations, but we just provide the actual basis to collect and then secondly, verify that information.
Thank you for that, Catherine.
And of course, we can provide more details. I'll get her details afterwards and give some more details of that services.
And that is actually a key focus for a lot of the UK agriculturists, zero as well. We've got one, John, for you as well. Have you come across any solutions for gathering stress analytics for crops growing within a polytunnel?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Annabelle?
Yes, so it's, have you come across any solutions for gathering stress analytics for crops grown within a polytunnel?
Well, we focus on remote sensing using satellites. So obviously, crops out in the field, that's kind of our domain expertise. So I think that I'll defer to someone at probably Agri-EPI who's probably better placed to answer that kind of question. Whilst I'm on, I'll also kind of touch on the sustainability question that Catherine just got as well, because that's one of our key focuses. How we can aid farmers in getting us as a country, the UK, to net zero, how we can deploy precision agriculture tools to allow them to use fewer inputs, for example, to use machinery less, and also aiding them to transition maybe to agroforestry. I think, one of the maps I showed you before, you could see the productivity zones in the field. And you can imagine, going forward, the farmer might decide, okay, this is a low productivity zone. Maybe we should transition to an alternative use like agroforestry. That's yet one example of what we're doing. So, that is going to be a huge push going forward. And I think a lot of our work as well is outside the UK, focused on smallholder farmers. If we think from a global perspective, smallholder farmers are probably 95% of the farm force globally. And they impact, I think, 2.5 billion people. So it's a big, potential reach we're talking about. And if we are going to, talk about feeding, as Ronan said, another additional set of people having to, increase production by potentially 70 to 100% in the next 30 years, then it's key that we get smallholder farmers productive or more productive, so we can, produce more on less land, essentially, because that's what's required. And the key to doing that is unlocking financial services. So a lot of the work we do as well is around allowing smallholder farmers, whether it's in Ivory Coast or South Africa or wherever, or in India, to get access to insurance and also to banking, to invest in their farm holdings, boost their productivity, get quality inputs. And there, as a globe as well, we can think about getting, to net zero from an agriculture perspective. And that's where things get really exciting, because we can act as a carbon sink and contribute on a global level to being part of the climate crisis solution. So that's a very interesting question I just wanted to touch on as well.
Okay, great. Actually, we've got another question that links into that, and it is sort of posed towards John and Catherine. So do you think intelligent agriculture robots in the field could be a good complementary partner to what you're working on? Do you see a demand for data at more detailed level?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. I think our system is designed to work regardless of any kind of ground truthing. It doesn't need calibration per se in any particular geography. Now, if you have a situation where there is some on the ground robotics, which is, for example, monitoring from a different angle, or it might be, for example, even testing the soil for different kind of properties. Our system is designed to ingest all that kind of information. So I think, it definitely would add for a richer data set, which could be used to empower more decision making from the farmers' perspective. For us, a lot of the farmers we talk to, they might not be using these kind of tools as yet. So our system is agnostic, and we're quite confident that from day one we can offer a lot of insights purely from satellite imagery. But obviously, if we can add even more data sets to that, that is going to only empower the farmers and to the whole supply chain even more. And like I said, we are designed to just pull in all the data that we can to produce powerful insights. So I think there could be definitely some kind of complementarity between us and other data sets, and whether it's robotics or and I know drone is technically considered a kind of robot. So, we can say we also ingest, drone data as and when it's available. And our system can use that to empower farmer insights. So very interesting question, definitely.
Does anyone else want to add anything?
And fully agree with John's statement there. I mean, certainly more detailed analysis than I would know, but we have a large electrical division, that's been working with the agri and many other sectors as well on AI and robotics for some time. And a lot of what we do as well is about the gathering of really true data, which can help make those informed decisions. As you heard throughout my presentation, it's all about the analysis of that to come back in and help you predict better how you face and challenge the issues that you see. And of course, data is immense in many different ways than you can get it. I mean, traditionally, a company like Intertek, you know, it's been more via the manual on-site experience that we would have, actually going to the farms, going to the field and actually doing a set of tests or inspections or audits, etc., and gathering data that way to add into it. But we have a lot more of a need now to help our customers with exactly that, where they're looking at robotic way of actually gathering the data. Whether that is, you know, we've done a lot of work more on the warehouse side of things, maybe at the end of the supply chain, value chain piece, but we've seen a lot, as I mentioned, with a lot of those companies that are doing R&D now and moving themselves through to the growing practices and what they can do to continually gather that data to see if the innovative ways they're trying to change something is working. So slightly different tangent to what John said, but yes, all of it helps to feed in and create a much richer process. A lot of it just will come down to the cost and the development and where within the supply chain people can afford to do this.
Yeah, and that cost piece is very key, because obviously we don't want to saddle the farmer with, you know, additional costs just for the sake of it. Now, I just want to stress that, you know, satellite imagery, you know, there's a lot of data that's there. The sensors are obviously extremely powerful. We pull all 10 to 15 spectral bands currently with our analysis, as opposed to things like NDVI, which only pull obviously the 3. So, you know, we already have very powerful tools. So I think we have to be very selective and careful, you know, how we want to add and augment that kind of database, you know, because we don't want the cost to escalate. But when there's obviously a practical way to do that, we'll be open to discussing for sure.
Yeah, we can take some of these discussions offline. Ronan, was there anything you wanted to add to that question, or?
No, I think the guys have pretty much covered it off in terms of kind of obviously closer to that sector. But I think just to echo, I suppose, what Catherine said around, you know, data and how it's become a strategic asset, as I said, you know, and that amazing ability now where it doesn't matter whether you're a startup, whether you're a business of 2 or 3, or whether you're a large enterprise, you actually have access to the same resources as anyone else, which is really unique in this time where everyone can get access to data and everyone can get insight from it. So it's, yeah, just like to say that. Okay,
brilliant. I had a few questions saying, can we get everyone's email addresses? And I will sort of introduce you post-webinar, so that's just to let you all know on the line. We've got a question coming from Ronan as well. So it's, what do you do if you don't have the Amazon Web Services skills in-house? You know, how can you overcome this? What's the next step?
Yeah, and that's a question actually I get quite a lot in particularly working with small to medium-sized businesses. Is that they have an idea, they have an understanding of where they want to go as a business, but there is a skill shortage in the market at the moment. So there's a couple of options. The first option is obviously upskill yourself, so you can actually take some of our free training online via our digital classrooms, and you can actually engage with some of our AWS certifications. However, that's not an option for every company. And what you can do is we have a large ecosystem of partners. We have a large ecosystem all over the UK actually. And what these partners can do is actually help you execute. They can help you understand what your business outcomes are, what you want to achieve, and then actually help you map together the architecture and get you there as such. Another option is we've launched Amazon IQ, which is a platform that allows you to look at contractors. So you can bring in someone who has specific AWS skills. They can share their resume in terms of their past and what they've worked on before, and you can work with them kind of and spin them out as you need. So that would be my recommendation, is either upskill your team yourself through our training certifications, or engage with our partner network or our other platforms we have as well. And that's all available on the link as well that we've given. So that would be my recommendation.
Brilliant, thanks, Ronan. And you and John also work together on the geobotanics platform as well, so scaling up the geobotanics platform as well, which is worth mentioning. on that one. We've also had another question come in. This is for you, Catherine. So, and it sort of links back to what we were talking about earlier. And how far into a supply chain should you look?
I mean, the problem today is, and as we know very much so with the scandals that hit the food agri value chains over the last few years, the demand for that really in-depth visibility and traceability is quite important. In fact, it's demanded in a number of areas in terms of legal mandatory requirements to show that chain of custody. We always say it depends. It depends on what the end goal is that you're trying to achieve. So whether it is legal, whether it is from a brand positioning perspective, or whether it is coming from your need to get to better innovative processes from within your own organization. And so the more information you can actually obtain in your supply chain, the more informed you're going to be to run all of those data sets and be able to understand the risk and be able to do that. There's obviously a fear with giving visibility within a supply chain, as we understand, for all the obvious reasons, people not wanting to necessarily be seen as a middle party and being taken out, or having better dialogue with the tier below so that they maybe take on more of what's being done by the tier above, etc., to reduce costs. And I think one thing that certainly the current scenario has that we've seen this year is that there is going to be more pressure to reduce costs. Irrelevant of all of those points, the sector this sector that we're sitting in, that traceability and visibility is absolutely key and paramount when it comes to the food sector. And so we find that there is the need to take it back as a minimum to the raw material level that we see, which in various supply chains can be anywhere from tier 3 to tier 6. It really depends on the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Catherine. We've actually come back to a question now for you, John, which is around COVID-19, which is something we haven't actually touched upon today. But the question is, how could Mantle Labs be related to the COVID-19 food security crisis?
Yeah, I'll just give one example on that. So we have a large commodity trading client who usually would send people out into the field to monitor the crop progress. And obviously this was impossible during the height of the pandemic, probably isn't possible at the moment anyway. So even more than unusual, they really relied on sites from remote sensing to understand how the crop was progressing, the vegetative health of the crop, and also flagging any early issues. And there were some issues, and they were able to essentially go and source from alternative producer pretty early on in the process. So I think now with COVID, it's kind of allowed people to have a bit of a case study in a way of some of the applications of remote sensing. I think I showed you the presentation as well, the example of Northern Italy in terms of being able to remotely understand and ID the crop. So I don't know if I explained very clearly, but essentially we were identifying corn versus soybeans and tracking it during the growing season. Something, again, which probably would have, typically you'd have someone going out and literally going and checking manually. Now this is all being done with sensor technology, combining with the AI to identify the crop during the cycle. So I think, yeah, I mean, COVID in a way has opened people, I guess, to bring in new digital remote technologies, and hopefully in a way, it's provided a bit of a case study for them to say, yes, this is something that we want to integrate into our workflow going forward.
Okay, great. Catherine or Ronan, is there anything you want to add on that?
Nope, very insightful.
Okay. Ronan, we've just got a question about what are Amazon Web Services' biggest differentiators from other providers?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I suppose that customers tell us that really matters and what they notice is different is, first of all, around the culture. So the culture that we have, where we focus on the long term, and we're really customer centric in how we operate. We try and understand, customers, their experience. We try and understand what they're trying to achieve, We try and really dive deep on figuring out how them experiences can be improved, and we work backwards from there. We have a distinctive working backwards methodology that we use, where we start from the customer and then we build our solutions backwards from there. So the first area will be customer obsession. As I said in my previous presentation, 90% of what we build at AWS is actually driven by what customers tell us, and the other 10% is what we interpret customers to want based on what we know from our interactions. The second point as well is around kind of, we call ourselves, we're pioneers in that, you know, DNA or innovation is very much embedded within our DNA, you know, and this is something that is kind of unique to us, and that we want to be, we really want to look at the future. We're willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time, and I think what that really means is when we first released the Kindle, you know, it was quite a new concept, but we were very clear on what we wanted to achieve, and that was a book in your hand in 60 seconds. So we've stuck to that, and it's played out to be very widespread now. So I'd say DNA, innovation is within our DNA. Other companies try and acquire their innovation, which can work. It's just not our strategy. And finally, I would say that we're very long-term orientated. And that's another thing that customers tell us as well, is that we're really focused on the long-term vision. We want to create relationships with our customers that outlast all of us on this webinar today. You know, we don't work on a quarterly basis. We're very much driven towards the long term. So that's kind of makes us different to some of the other companies that other customers have worked with.
Okay, great. We've also got something that's come in as well. Actually, John, this is linking back to the previous COVID-19 question. So can you give us an example of how a client has benefited from using the system in the recent crisis?
Okay, so I guess you know, similar to, you know, I just kind of answered that, but you know, I think, you know, COVID, you know, if you want me to give essentially another example, you know, we have had a number of inquiries from another vertical I'll talk about, insurance. So typically, if you think about, you know, people going out and assessing kind of, you know, crops, you know, and you know, there's a whole argument that a lot of this could be done using remote sensing technology. And we have had a lot of inquiries from your insurers. Actually, we've had two large ones coming on board recently, you know, based on, you know, just seeing the value in when they look to expand their crop insurance portfolios in terms of using enablers like remote sensing to enable them to actually monitor the crop progress and claims risk, and also potential fraud using fully remote technology. So that's another kind of use case I would probably highlight. You know, we pride ourselves on being a leader in terms of, you know, providing an index, which enables crop insurance to be given to farmers who previously excluded, and also more cost-effective solutions to farmers who already have insurance. And if we look at the way that, you know, that's enabled by remote sensing, it kind of cuts out a lot of the cost in the whole process. And now with COVID, people are again seeing the value in having these remote solutions. So that's another kind of use case I'll highlight, given the question has resurfaced again.
Thank you, John. Thank you. We're just going to go, we've got 2 minutes left. So Catherine, we're just going to finish on a question for you, which is, how frequently do you think we should assess suppliers for compliance management?
Yeah, there's no set rule when it comes, well, there's some set rules when it comes to some compliance certification standards that people follow, but usually it comes back to this risk assessment where you've weighed up the likelihood of the risk with each supplier based on things like looking at their inherent risks, so the country, the type of commodity, etc. What's the weight of the risk associated with that? If it's something more on a quality side or something more on a, maybe let's say an ethical compliance side, etc. What's the, you know, is there peak seasons when those issues can become more problematic, etc. And then you look at that against maybe then the other data you've gathered from them, from self-assessments, etc. And you look at the combined score to say, okay, well, how often should I actually go on site to check such risks? And that's how most people tend to work out and weigh up the best way that they should engage with their own internal teams, as well as maybe third-party providers like the likes of Intertech to go on site and perform such due diligence. We tend to find that when it comes to more high-risk areas, it tends to be a yearly activity that certain on-site compliance activities happen. There's obviously then the ongoing demand as and when products go to move through different parts of the value chain, when different parts of testing has to happen. So that's literally as and when. But when it comes to more on-site due diligence, it varies between a year and every 2-year activity, depending on the risk of the supply chain. But one thing we have seen certainly as a result of COVID is looking to remove a lot more of those activities to maybe remote audit activities. So the ability to save some money in terms of the time needed on site, as well as actually the travel costs, etc., means that you could maybe actually you could reduce the cost overall, or you could look at more compliance activities if we maybe move certain parts, not all, because some it very much so requires on site, but some of it by doing remotely. We've seen now some companies looking at the way that they're going to assess suppliers differently as a result of that.
Okay, Catherine, thank you very much. It's now 11:01, so we're going to conclude the webinar there. Thank you very much for all the presentations today and the speakers. It's been really insightful. This will be available to view later today. We'll send you the presentations, and again, anyone requested introductions, we'll do that so this afternoon. So thank you all. I will end the webinar now, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.